following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Georgia Southern athletics, an official podcast for Georgia Southern athletics as well. Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed. Not necessarily fresh, but back off your trip from New Orleans for Sunbelt Conference Media Day 2022. It was a two-day event. You were there for day one on Tuesday of last week for the Eastern side. Had to... And you don't really think about it whenever you're adding 4 new teams to the league, but eventually somebody's got to say, maybe we can't fit all these teams in one day.
And I don't know if the Sun Belt ultimately is done with realignment. Who knows? They could go up to as high as 16, which if you think that, you might be going where the SEC does, where they do an entire week's worth, where you've got a couple of teams. But this being the first year of a 2-day event, from an Eastern Division standpoint, I thought everything went fine. They moved us this year. Remember, a year ago, we were set up in the main area, but I think that they looked at the music as being so overpowering to so many of those shows that they moved us to that back ballroom. I think they called it the Orpheus Room, right behind the main room. And we had our own area. There was a little walkway where coaches and sports info directors could lead them in. It was a lot better because we had our own space. And I think ideally they may go to a 3-day setup down the line where that first day is hey, let's make sure we get everybody here. Then you can go east, then you can go west, because with 14 teams, you just can't do that in one day. But the way that people were shuttling in at different times, few guys in the West Division didn't really get a chance to catch up with because they were only coming there for the one day. In fact, as we were leaving on Tuesday afternoon, as we were getting on the elevator, Mike Hammett from ULM was getting off the elevator, and he says, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I gotta go," because Robert Conley and I were on the same flight back to Savannah, so we had to book it to get from the Sheraton over to the airport. But I think I saw Hammett for maybe 30 seconds.
And I heard that Sean Elliott in Atlanta did not follow the usual travel protocol.
No, and I was worried. I was legit worried that Sean Elliott was not on our flight. That's how our Facebook Live interview began on Tuesday. As I looked at him and said, I was making sure he had to come because the last 4 years have been on the same flight. He said, this is probably the closest I've ever been to somebody from Georgia. No argument there.
You can get your questions into what has turned into a jam-packed episode of Inside Eagle Nation. We're going to have a couple of updates throughout the afternoon, the evening. We're going to dive through the news and notes here in just a few minutes, but we're also going to get into some stories from Sunbelt Conference Media Day. You've got some that don't necessarily involve football either, which we'll get to that. That's what you call a tease. There you go. And then we've been talking that we're going to be doing it throughout the summer at some point, and more people have been asking for it, of updating folks on where former Eagles are, both in the NFL, and it works this week because they just reported to training camp last week, and also in Major League Baseball or Minor League Baseball, former Eagles in pro ball. So we will get to that later on in this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. But as always, any questions, comments, concerns you may have, you can drop them on the comments here on Facebook Live. You can tweet us at GS Sports Network, or you can text us 912-274-3607, or you can email us to gssnbooth@gmail.com. And we actually had a message. Our first email came in a couple of weeks ago, but had to wait till you got back. We couldn't drop this on Terry because we'd have gone longer than an hour 20 last week.
Yeah, I was impressed you guys had that much content. That was good.
Terry had that much content. I think I said about 15 words. Had our buddy Bob McKessie send us an email, and going back to our favorite Georgia Southern moment, we started that a couple of weeks ago. You can send us yours to all the outlets that we just talked about. But he said going way back, 1982-83 men's basketball, the TAC championship game against Little Rock in Little Rock.
Yeah, Barton Coliseum, Eric Hightower's buzzer-beating jump shot from the baseline that sent the Eagles to their first ever NCAA tourney. That's a good one.
Speaking of Little Rock, and I'm glad you said that, Bob, because something that I wanted to bring up, and I know Little Rock is no longer in the Sun Belt Conference, so we aren't supposed to talk about them, but forget that noise. Just coming out last week from Little Rock Trojans that they are going to name the floor Joe Foley Court at the Jack Stevens Center, the longtime head coach for women's basketball at Little Rock, and everybody knows what Little Rock women's basketball has been over the years. We've talked about it plenty. But yes, he has been really good on the court with his teams, but off the floor, and you and I have told this story a couple of different times. I think it was the first year, maybe the second, third year we were in the league, but it was the year that Angel Elderkin from Appalachian State was going through chemo treatment for her cancer, and Joe Foley won the Sun Belt Conference Coach of the Year. He's done it many times. And as he accepted the award, it was prior to their game they were playing against Appalachian State. He goes out to center court. Carl Benson at the time, the commissioner of the Sun Belt Conference, hands him the award. He calls Angel Elderkin out and hands her the award. That tells you what kind of guy Joe Foley is. Got to talk to him a couple of different times when we made the trip out to Little Rock, but great individual. One of 4 women's basketball coaches with their name on the court.
I will be very honest. I cannot tell you the other 3. I know Pat Summitt's
I was about to say, I can tell you one.
I do not know the other 2.
Probably.
Didn't think about that. NC State, that's right. I wouldn't know the other one, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bob, if you're listening,
Yeah, we need our crack staff on this.
The funny thing about Joe Foley, and we've also talked before, he was also the head coach at Arkansas for a number of years. Mm-hmm. But when we went out to basically start conference play in the state of Arkansas, this was, I think, the December the 30th game. Of course, Brian Berg was an assistant at Little Rock for that 2015 season where they won 30 games and beat Purdue in the NCAA tournament. There was one person waiting for us for practice. It was Joe Foley. And him and Berg must have yucked it up for a good 10, 15 minutes. And Berg said he was looking forward to seeing him. But the fact that he was the first person we saw, he didn't just saunter in as Georgia Southern's getting shoot around in or ball handling or whatever. He was the first person there to greet us. I thought that was pretty sweet.
All right, we've got a comment on Facebook Live that probably need to go ahead and knock out. Chad Willis from Georgia Southern Volleyball. And it's a question for me, but you're going to get roped into this too.
All right.
So, a little backstory before we give the question comment. Last week on East Georgia's Morning Show, we had Chad Willis come on to talk about Georgia Southern Volleyball. Taylor Sherwin came on as well, even though Brian kept calling her Taylor Sheraton from Yellowstone. Never mind.
I mean, we were there. We were at the Sheraton New Orleans. It all ties together.
And then Madison Brown, who is now a volunteer assistant coach for Georgia Southern Volleyball, came in to introduce her to Eagle Nation. Well, I guess reintroduce her to Eagle Nation. She played here for 4 years. She doesn't need an introduction. But Chad Willis is known for the dad jokes. And he dropped some good ones on East Georgia's Morning Show, which you can imagine Brian and Travis had a ball with.
Oh, absolutely.
He had a Star Wars one that they were just in hog heaven. But he says, now that I'm a dad, to give us your best dad joke. Thanks, Chad. You know, I don't have them yet, but it's funny, when you Google dad jokes, the first thing that pops up are 145 dad jokes that will keep your family rolling, which, why 145, I'm not quite sure.
Because you remember it. If it was 100 or 200.
Right.
No, if it was 145, it's very specific.
Exactly. So there's a couple of good ones on here. Do you have a favorite dad joke? And I don't really know what constitutes a dad joke.
All right, what is a duck's favorite thing to eat?
I don't know.
A box of Quackers. I always have that one.
You know, I don't know if these are dad jokes. These are just kind of what we throw at each other on road trips.
You get us going 8 hours to Mobile for a baseball or a football game.
Coming home from Tampa at 2 o'clock in the morning and
driving across Alligator Alley, and you find some things you never thought were funny before.
Then you look at it the next day, you're like, that's not really funny, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, it sure was. There's a couple on here that are pretty good. I'm afraid for the calendar. Its days are numbered.
Wow.
What do the Eiffel Tower and a tick have in common?
A tick?
Correct. They're both parasites.
Now I feel like we need a dad joke of the day.
Oh, I got 145 days worth right here. I guess 143 now.
So this will get us through the next almost 3 years.
Exactly.
If we do one.
We're rolling.
Thank you, Chad. That was very good.
Yeah. We're rolling on Facebook Live today. Cody Anderson has answered the question. We mentioned that Joe Foley going to have his name on the court at Little Rock. There are 3 other women's coaches that have their name on the court. Pat Summitt, Kay Yao we had, Gary Blair, the other 3, or the other one.
I would not have gotten that one.
No, I would not have either.
Thank you, Cody.
But we dive into this week's news and notes in Georgia Southern athletics. Earlier on today, Georgia Southern women's soccer had their preseason announced. As you look at it on gseagles.com, you've got 2-a-day practices, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., and then 7 o'clock to 9 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Monday, Georgia Southern will head over to Auburn, Alabama for the first exhibition of the season to take on the Auburn Tigers. That's a 7:30 kickoff. Again, Monday the 8th. They will have a one-session practice on Tuesday and then off next Wednesday for the first day of classes. But head coach Chris Adams and company getting rolling again, trying to improve on a pretty impressive season last year.
And that's the fun thing about this time of the year. We always hype up Georgia Southern football practice, which is going to begin in earnest on Wednesday. But as football is starting, you look across the pitch, literally, and you've got men's and women's soccer that are having their preseason practice as well.
That's what I love, because you and I out at football practices, you can just kind of walk around that what was usually the offensive field.
Yeah.
And you can look one way and watch John Murphy, Chris Adams, and his crew turn the other way, and you got Georgia Southern football. It's like the best of both worlds.
You just got to find a way to avoid the oversized dragonflies, the gnats you're not going to be able to do anything about. But
and that hill, that hill is a lot steeper and a lot farther down than it looks.
See, most of the time, those early practices, you're in the maybe the upper 70s, low 80s. But when you're getting about to period 15 or 16, because typically practices are going 25 periods,
yeah.
But you're going about period 15 or 16. That's when the sun is getting up to its highest point, and you're wondering why you wore dark blue and long pants. But if you know, the bugs are going to eat you. Mm-hmm. So you got to find a way. Okay, which am I going to live with more easily, as opposed to if I do it the wrong way, how I'm going to deal with that the rest of the day.
And then you get into that weird spot where you're like, okay, it's hot, but the bugs are so bad. Do I put on a pullover? Then you have to start asking the real questions of life.
Yeah.
But when you dive into Georgia Southern football, voting opened today for the first vote on the 40-year team. Georgia Southern Athletics has brought out a lot of the 40-year anniversary of modern football. EFAA and the athletic department have partnered up to name a 40-year team. Now, it's a couple of days for each position group. Like today, offensive line and defensive line, 1st through the 4th, are open to vote. You can go on gseagles.com and vote for who you think should be part of the 40-year team. There's a lot of work that went into it from the EFAA and from athletics on trying to whittle down of who should be even on the vote, right. And then fans will vote in who it should be.
You're just taking the list that's already been created by the collaboration from athletics and the EFAA.
And so to be eligible for this team, you had to be on the Georgia Southern Athletics Hall of Fame ballot. You didn't necessarily have to be in the Hall of Fame, just on the ballot. An all-conference selection or conference award honoree, an All-American, a member of the Georgia Southern Athletics Hall of Fame, a national award winner, an NFL draft pick, an NFL player, or have their number retired. There's only 2, so that one probably checks a lot of boxes on that. But you just have to check one of the boxes on there in order to become eligible for the fan vote. Again, today through the 4th, offensive line and defensive line. Specialist and slot backs will be August 8th through the 11th. Wide receivers and DBs will be the 15th through the 18th. Running backs and linebackers will be voted on the 22nd through the 28th. And then August 29th through September 1st will be the quarterbacks vote. Go online. You only get one vote. Each fan can only vote one time, so don't try to vote for Tracy Ham 13 times, even though people probably want to. But you help pick the 40-year team that will be unveiled in a couple of months, or in a couple of weeks, rather.
For instance, with offensive and defensive line, you can vote up to 10. If you don't have 10, 5, 6, 3, whatever. Yep. But when you really think about how many greats you have in either of those positions, you feel bad that you could only pick 10. I did it earlier today, and I think I wanted to pick about 15 different offensive linemen and 13 different defensive linemen. But for those who haven't voted yet, the numbering system is relative to what Colin talked about, the criteria. So in one way, the more numbers next to somebody, the better. But if you're a Hall of Famer, that probably helps your cause a good bit. Or it could be somebody that was one of your favorites as a young fan or throughout the whole time you've been a fan of Georgia Southern. But I really like this, and that'll be revealed the day before Morgan State on the 2nd of September.
All right. Since it's offensive line, defensive line, give me the one person that if they are not on this, you're going to be severely upset.
So you're basically asking me for at least one person that I already voted for.
Correct. I'm looking for your shoe-in.
Oh.
And we'll get to shoe in a little bit, but
wow. Just one.
Yeah. Mine, Man Bear Pig. Brent Russell.
Do I need to pick one of both?
You don't have to.
All right, this is one I've been very partial to, and I've talked with Terry a number of times about this guy. I've talked with Tracy a number of times on the offensive line, Vance Pike. I know that goes way back to 85, and I know he passed away a number of years ago, but that is somebody that is still considered not just one of the top offensive linemen in the history of Eagle football, but one of the best offensive linemen in the history of 1AA football. Transferred over from Auburn. He was on the first national championship team, on number 62, that helped protect Tracy during the Furman comeback. But if you're talking specifically O-lineman, then I'm starting Vance Pike and then figuring it out from there. I'm not going to give you away my whole list, but that is one that I did vote for earlier today.
See, I had a D-line, you had offensive line.
I like
Boom,
that.
We're ready.
That's good.
Talked about preseason scheduling for Georgia Southern women's soccer a little bit earlier. Georgia Southern football putting out the preseason practice schedule for at least the first week. So it starts on Wednesday, 10:05 a.m. at Allen E. Paulson Stadium. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, all 10:05 to 12:05 at Paulson of this week, the tail end of this week, the 3rd through the 6th. Sunday they will have off. That'll be kind of the regiment that will be going forward. And then Monday of Tuesday next week, they'll go from about 10 o'clock until 12 o'clock. Monday will be at Paulson. Tuesday will be at Eagle Creek. And then on Wednesday, they'll have off for the first day of classes, like a lot of sports. And
one point that Coach Helton made sure to note at the women's clinic on Friday night, these are open practices. Sometimes during the fall and even during the season, they're not necessarily open to all fans, but he made sure that everyone there knew, starting on Wednesday, please come out if you're able. Now, I know that's in the middle of the workday, depending on what your job is during the summer, but if you can make it out at any point during fall camp or throughout the season, the gates are wide open. Come watch this team as they prep for 22.
You know, for a 2-hour block, you just take a little bit of an extended lunch, and I know lunch starting at 10:05 is a little bit hard to sell, but maybe you have a meeting at 9:30, and it just doesn't make sense to go back to the office until after lunch.
That made me think of something really interesting. What's the earliest you've ever had lunch?
Oh. You know... Probably at some kind of conference tournament because the mental clock gets a little off.
Well, you're mixing your meals. You don't really know which one it is, but it's maybe second meal or third meal or first snack or whatever it is.
I know when I was in probably middle school, you had your different lunch periods. And so lunch started, I think for some people at like 10:30. I'm like, that's barely breakfast. But so probably about 10:30.
That's what I was thinking too.
But I'm very and you know this, traveling with me, I'm very set on when, especially, I'm not a big breakfast person, but lunch is got to be right around noon. 12:30 to 1, you're pushing it.
Well, it's about when the sun is getting at its highest point,
right,
where the hunger pangs are going to
right,
find some food.
There's some kind of gravity in there somewhere. And then I'm an early dinner person, like 5, 6 o'clock. And I know that probably puts me in a rest home, but
That's how I was growing up.
Yeah,
we would have real early dinner.
Yeah, I always have been. So don't worry about it. Georgia Southern football will also have 2 scrimmages throughout the preseason practice. The first one coming not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, August the 13th at Paulson. The second one will be down at Savannah's Memorial Stadium on August the 20th. And there will be a scrimmage, a little Eagles clinic that will follow, and more of that coming up on gseagles.com in the next couple of weeks.
So if you put the pieces of the puzzle together, that one on the 13th is part of Donors Weekend. The schedule that was put out said pregame for a scrimmage with the Eric Russell Fund donors getting a chance to tour the FOC with AP and Tracy. Scrimmage is going to happen that evening with the lights on. That's going to be a pretty cool deal because remember the spring game a couple of years ago was under the lights. We were out at Oklahoma, so we didn't get a chance to experience that. But the Savannah practice is something that's been done since, I want to say, 2017.
Yeah.
Remember, Georgia Southern really came back in thanks to Memorial Stadium down in Savannah. So this is really nice to, one, be able to tap back into history, but also attract that Savannah market, which is one that is very important, especially this time of the year.
So talking Georgia Southern football, again, last week you were out in New Orleans. You were about this time probably settling in for dinner with our buddies down in New Orleans. But Tuesday, Sunbelt Conference Media Day, the first of 2 days. The Tuesday was the East, Wednesday was the West. You said when you were on your way back, you said, I have stories for next week, and I got excited. So story time with Danny.
Okay, Tuesday night, big kudos to Chris Davis for setting up the dinner with Georgia Southern. We had a couple of donors, also with Jared Benko. We had a chance to eat with Leonard Spence Mullis and also Clay Huckabee.
Spence went?
Oh, yes, he did.
How about that?
Yeah, Spence and I talked for a while on Tuesday.
Man.
But Kyle Van Treese and Dylan Springer were the player representatives, and I think altogether there was about 11 or 12 people. I was not familiar with the restaurant that we ate at called Gianna. It's apparently a really good Italian restaurant, a couple blocks away. Davis had the hookup, so we end up getting the table directly in the center of the restaurant. It's almost as if it was supposed to be that we were eating there at that time. But authentic Italian, it was out of this world. And A.J. Henderson was part of the dining party. And after a few minutes, we're taking care of the appetizers. The meatballs were unbelievable. And he looks a couple of tables over and notices somebody. And he's trying to get everybody's attention or somebody's attention. And I look at him and he's trying to, do one of these deals, the head off to the right or the left. And he's mouthing something. I said, well, just say it. But I guess he didn't want to be too loud because didn't want it to carry and let this person hear it. But I finally realized he said, Emerald's over there. I said, the chef Emerald? He said, yes, 2 tables over. So I, of course, looked the other direction first. But then the right direction, 1 table, 2 table, the heads separate, and there's Emerald. Got his eyeglasses on, menu open, about to have a glass of white wine.
Bam.
He's got 4 restaurants down there.
Right.
I didn't realize it was that many, but he's developed his own cuisine style, and I think it's New Orleans or whatever it is. But he ends up having his meal. We, of course, have ours, and I think we asked him for a photo. That didn't really work out too well. But we did get to wave at him on the way by.
So you were eating at a restaurant that Emerald chose over his own restaurant?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Then
that probably tells you how the meal went.
It was look, we need to go back. But when we left, we ended up going closer towards downtown, and the treat continued with some dessert from Cafe Du Monde. Have not been there since the first time that we were there, so it's been a good 4 or 5 years. And yes, those beignets were a nice touch to the end of the Italian meal. Walked the guys downtown for a little bit, came back to the hotel, and then on Tuesday, you're up, you know how it is, we're up early, and the good thing is you're done by early enough afternoon where it doesn't feel like you're there all day. but I can only imagine for players and coaches, there's only so many questions you can ask people. And I'm guessing if you're Coach Heldon, you've probably gotten a little tired of being asked for the 35th time. Well, it's your first year here. What are you going to do? What's the platinum standard about? He's getting the same questions a bunch. But we had him on towards the end of the day on Facebook Live. But those conversations with him, Kyle, and Dylan, maybe three of the more favorite conversations I've had with any Eagle coach, athlete since I got here in 2015. There's a lot of positivity in that building coming off of 3-9. They feel like they're doing it the right way, and they feel like they're going to surprise a lot of people. Media days are fun because everybody's in a good mood because nobody's lost. Nobody's won yet, but nobody's lost. And the talk the entire Tuesday was, well, this Sun Belt East is probably the equivalent, the G5 equivalent of the SEC West, how tough it's going to be. You could talk yourself into just about everybody doing well, but at the same time, somebody's going to have to lose.
Yeah.
If somebody's winning, somebody's losing. So somebody is going to beat up on somebody else. Who knows? Maybe by the end of the year, everybody's 4-4, and that would just be a cruel joke for everybody down at the conference. But getting a chance to talk with Old Dominion head coach Ricky Ronnie, who was formerly at Penn State, their sports info director Eric Bohannon, who was there the last time Georgia Southern played them in 2012. He's still there. He just got promoted recently. Big fan of Charles Huff and Marshall. He was the first interview we had of the day. My Maryland guy, he's more towards the eastern part. So, of course, we talked about crab cakes, and we both agreed you're not getting any crab cakes in Huntington, West Virginia.
Crab cakes and football. That's what Maryland does.
And then we end the day with James Madison, another school that Georgia Southern has a historic rival with. Talk with Kurt Signetti. We have a Pittsburgh tie. I went to college about an hour south, and I could hear the Pittsburgh in his voice, and it made me think, oh, okay, I missed this a little bit. But we talked for a while, and just really psyched to have those three in our division. Didn't get to see anybody from the West because that was Wednesday. But I thought the Sun Belt did a really good job putting it on, and maybe the best part of the day was during Georgia Southern's open session in the main room, they got the backdrop right.
Attaway.
They got the backdrop right. And you can bet that Jared Benko's two eyes were on that backdrop the entire time to make sure that it was Southern instead of State.
You bring up Charles Huff from Marshall, and watching the videos that you did throughout the day, he was one of my favorites because you can tell, and a lot of times when you're having all these coaches on, you're asking what Georgia Southern kind of means in their program and what the rivalry or the talk is like between Georgia Southern and whatever coach you're talking to. They can give you the standard, 6 national championships, everybody knows how State, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
This is somebody that you could tell, one, had done his homework, and two, loves college football to the core, that not only is he know it because Georgia Southern's in the conference, but he's talking about wanting to go by Eagle Creek when they come down here. That's somebody that I really kind of struck a nerve with, that he's somebody that gets it.
You don't become the number one recruiter in the country unless you've got all your ducks in a row.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense.
And remember, he overlapped with Jared at Mississippi State for that 1 year in 2018, and he spoke about Jared for a good couple of minutes during our session with him, and that was really nice to hear him kind of tie things together.
It's funny you talk about all of these coaches get asked the same question. I'm sure Marshall, Old Dominion, JMU, Southern Miss on Wednesday, everybody got asked, well, your first year in the league, what's the Sun Belt look like? And it's probably one of those you could record it on your phone and hit play. But
Hang on 1 second.
Yeah, give me a minute. The thing I like that you always do is, especially with somebody like, I think it was Charles Huff, because he had background with Nick Saban.
Yeah.
And, of course, if you're tied to Saban or you're tied to whoever, one of the big 4 or 5 coaches in college football, everybody's like, man, what was it like working for Saban?
Everybody.
But the thing that, and I love it because when you ask it, you bring up Saban and working in his time with Nick Saban, and they're always like, okay, here we go again. I mean, you can kind of see it in their face. They're like,
Get
okay,
my notes, hang on.
Here we go. All right, is that track 3? Yeah. But then you ask them, what did you teach Nick Saban, or what did Saban learn from you? And it's funny to me to watch because they're always like, okay, here we go again. And then all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, he didn't ask the right question. What?
We asked Butch Jones that last year because he was the first one we had last year, and I knew I was going to ask him this question, and even he did, because he was my case study. If it worked on him, it was going to work for everybody else. But what he said, man, you know what? Nobody's ever asked me that question before. So he went on for a little bit, and with Coach Huff, it was and then with Coach Cignetti, it was. I don't know that I taught him anything, but because he got his Pittsburgh going, I loved it.
He's got a little Byington in him.
The neat thing about Cignetti being on Saban's first staff, that was in 2007. Remember, they lost to ULM that year.
Yeah.
Saban was on his father's staff at West Virginia back in the 70s.
Huh.
So it was being able to tie everything back together. But I've always thought about finding creative ways to tap into these guys, and that's what made Van Treese and Springer. I mean, we've talked to Springer for the last 4 years, so there's not a whole lot about him we don't know. But for Coach Helton and Kyle Van Treese, we're still getting to know them. They've been here for a couple of months, but there's a lot more that you can extract. And I told them this off broadcast that people want to know about them. We could talk about their numbers, the games, the best throws, whatever. They want to know about them. They want to know about the people. And that's the whole reason why we went there, started going there in the first place. And Facebook Live, you can see facial expressions, you can see how their body posture is, and you can see how when they talk about certain things that they're impacted by what they're saying.
That's the best part of watching those, especially when you throw a curveball at them. Like when you're asking Kyle Van Treese about swimming and basketball and bowling and whatnot, they're always like, okay, they're in the zone of, okay, I'm going to be asked about being the starting quarterback. And
some look straight ahead. They don't even look, because they're just expecting the same 5 to 10 questions they've been getting all day.
And then they're like, what? You see the head kind of shaking. You're like, wait a minute, what did you say again?
And he really didn't want to talk about his bowling because he thought he was selling everybody short. Because his best game is a 280 something, maybe a 284. Jeez. And he said, you know what, I got lucky that day. I usually am only around a 220 or 240. You come on.
284. I don't know that I'd get that in 2 games.
I've had a 145 once, and that was luck. I can't spin the ball. But no. He says spinning a bowling ball is a lot like spinning a football.
I mean, makes sense.
He is terrific. He is an outstanding interview. He was raised very well.
All of those are archived on Facebook Live. They'll be going up on YouTube coming up in the next day or so as well, and we'll reshare them as we get closer and closer to kickoff for Georgia Southern football. But talking about former Eagles in the NFL, in the NFL training camps opened this past week on Friday or Saturday, depending on which camp you're in, but 7 different Eagles reporting to training camp this past week. Darrell Baker Jr., cornerback for the Arizona Cardinals out in Glendale, Arizona, and he's somebody that has kind of flown under the radar, no pun intended on flown, but he's kind of flown under the radar. He signed as an undrafted free agent, and he's somebody that could earn a spot special teams, and knowing the way that he's been, he's somebody that you could see working into a roster spot.
When Jim Nagy from the Reese's Senior Bowl got onto him middle of last year because of the measurables, I mean, he's got an amazing structure to him. He could play in the back end. He played all 3 positions in the defensive backfield during his time at Georgia Southern. But when Jim Nagy has you on his radar, it gets serious. And I feel bad a little bit because Darrell played through injury last year. He hurt the ankle. He hurt the elbow. Still, though, has the measurables, tests extremely well. And in the NFL, you can find a way through with your athleticism. That'll get you in.
Yeah.
But as Kendall Vildor has found, and this is something that he spent years perfecting here, your technique is what's going to set you over the top.
Yeah.
Everybody can run a little bit. Everybody can jump a little bit. But if you can do things correctly, time in, time out, that's when the good note goes on the clipboard.
And I think something that will kind of set Darrell Baker apart is a lot of the undrafted free agents will have a lot of measurables, like you talk about, the speed, the skills, and whatnot. But Darrell Baker, we've talked about it a lot, how smart of a football player he is, and with the previous defense, that position you had to be, especially when you're playing all across the back line.
I'll reference a conversation we had with Scott Sloan that in 2020, Darrell Baker played corner and then both safety positions in the same game. That was against UMass. That was the game that was just added to the schedule about a week and a half before. Scott said that in 29 years of coaching, he never had a guy play all three of those positions in the same game. And that was the game he had the crazy jumping interception that prevented UMass's touchdown.
Unreal.
So I hope the undrafted free agents, you have a special attachment to because
for sure.
And we'll talk about Raymond Johnson in a minute, but with Darryl, I really hope he gets a chance.
Yeah. Somebody that we know will, outside of something absolutely crazy happening, break camp with the Buffalo Bills, Tyler Bass at kicker over in Orchard Park, New York for the training camp for the Bills, and he's somebody that feel pretty good that he's going to be on that opening day roster.
And I saw earlier today where apparently his holder is, do you remember the San Diego State punter last year, Matt Ariza, the one that was booming 80-yarders every week? Apparently he was holding for him today.
Of course he was. I mean, duh.
So who's good? Who's the swaggiest of those two, or the swaggier of those two?
Yeah, T-Bass. I'm going to put my money on that one. Next up is Matt Breida, making his way to the New York Giants in their training camp over in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It's hard to believe he's been in the league for 6 years now, but signed with the Giants in the offseason, has seen time between a couple of different organizations with Miami the last couple of years, but he will obviously be behind Saquon Barkley, but has a definite shot with the speed that he's got to earn a roster spot with the Giants.
And Barkley's coming back from injury himself, and knowing that he's had health issues for a good portion of his career, it's not out of the question to think that Breida is not going to at least see decent action, maybe even really good action if the Giants go to a full timeshare. But Barkley, if he's healthy, he's one of those few guys that could be your, let's give it to him, 25, 30 touches. There aren't that many guys left, not that many guys that have that in the NFL anymore. But we'll have to see how that works out for Breida.
Next up, you mentioned him a little bit earlier, Raymond Johnson III at defensive end for the Cincinnati Bengals. Just signed with the Bengals a couple of weeks ago, back in July. But we mentioned it earlier. Made the Giants last year as an undrafted free agent. Recorded a sack of a guy named Tom Brady. And we'll try to do the same thing with the Cincinnati Bengals this year.
That's the defending AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals, too. So not just
That still sounds so weird to me.
Because we're used to Cincinnati being in the lower portion of the AFC, but Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, they have just exploded and nearly won the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah.
In fact, if it's not at SoFi Stadium, home of the Rams, maybe they do win the Super Bowl.
Next up, another kicker from Georgia Southern University, and Younghoe Koo, the Atlanta Falcons out in Flowery Branch. Koo is somebody that is already impressing at Falcons training camp. Saw Wes Durham tweet out earlier on, I think it was the first day of training camp, he was 5 for 5 and made a 53-yarder just to warm up on the day.
Yeah.
But he is somebody that some would say he was the Falcons offense last year, and depending on what the quarterback looks like this year, maybe the offense again for the Falcons. But it's good to see Younghoe Koo making his contributions. And I still go back to the day you and I were in Atlanta for the Falcons-Saints game working with Westwood One. And what was it, 4 onside kicks that were pulled off? Well, 3 of them, only 2 of them counted.
They recovered all 3, but only 2 counted.
Still blows my mind. But Koo doing his thing up in Atlanta.
He's one of those guys where whatever he touches, he can do extremely well.
With a smile on his face, too.
Remember those practices in 2016 where the specialist would just be on the sideline. He'd be making crazy eyes closed, one-handed catches behind his back, just kicking from all angles. He's got it. He's an athlete.
Next up, Jerick McKinnon with the Kansas City Chiefs. There was a little bit of question of whether he was going to be back in Kansas City. Wasn't initially re-signed at the end of the season, but throughout the summers, the Chiefs did bring him back into camp out at St. Joseph's, Missouri. And he's somebody that kind of shifted roles of what, still obviously as a running back, but went more as to the pass-catching running back last year for the Chiefs, and ended up having a pretty good role with the Chiefs a year ago.
It's funny that that's happened because he wasn't asked to catch a whole lot of passes at Georgia Southern. In fact, I think the best pass catching he did was the playoff where he had to move to DB and he had 2 interceptions in the main game. But to know that he is part of one of the best offenses in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes, is going to be an MVP candidate every year and likely a Super Bowl candidate every year as long as he's healthy.
And finally, the 7th and final Georgia Southern Eagle In the NFL training camps, Kendall Vildor, cornerback with the Chicago Bears out in Lake Forest, Illinois. He's somebody that was in and out of the starting lineup a year ago, but all reports out of Chicago say that he is battling for the starting spot, new staff in Chicago, and so it looks like he is kind of the front runner as you start training camp to be able to lock up that starting position.
And maybe the way he mentored Derek Canteen here, he could play mentor to Kyler Gordon, somebody that Will Harris coached for the last 4 years at Washington before he was the 39th pick in the draft this year.
So the 7 former Eagles in the NFL training camps, we will keep you abreast and say a couple of weeks before the first cuts, down to 85 on the roster, I believe. So a couple of weeks, and we will let you know how everybody is kind of progressing as you go throughout training camp to the start of the NFL season. Probably about 2-3 weeks after college football gets going.
Yeah, you've got the college football season starting 26 days from now.
I think Frank Solkowski put it best, as normally he does. It's August 1st. There is college and NFL football going to be played this month. I'm happy.
In our case, that August 27th is somebody who's very early on the schedule because Nebraska plays Northwestern over in Ireland. So the week before, Georgia Southern preps for Morgan State here in Statesboro, get a chance to see the second opponent because we'll be heading to Lincoln for the 10th.
So the 7 Eagles in professional football: Darrell Baker, Tyler Bass, Matt Breida, Raymond Johnson, Younghoe Koo, Jerick McKinnon, and Kendall Vildor. We will let you know on their status as we go throughout training camp in the NFL season, but switch it over to baseball side and former Eagles in professional baseball. Got a number of guys trying to make their way up through the minor league system. Sam Howard, the highest in AAA for Detroit in the Toledo Mud Hens. He was claimed off waivers back in the middle of May by the Tigers and was assigned to the AAA club, but since he's made his way to Toledo, 1-1 with a 3.63 ERA in 20 appearances, 23 strikeouts, just 10 walks, and about 17 innings of work, just over 17 innings of work. And he's somebody that over the last couple of years was with the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, bounced up and down between the big leagues and AAA, but he is somebody that I wouldn't be surprised if you see in Detroit before too long. He
got offset earlier this year because of a knee injury. He only made 3 appearances with Pittsburgh before he was DFA'd, and at least with Detroit/Toledo, he is you could almost equate it to a taxi guy like you would see in spring training, somebody that's on the cusp because of all the experience that he has as the Tigers trying to find a way to improve. I know it's been a couple of tough years for them, but you can never have too many relievers, and especially you can never have too many lefties.
Yeah. Chase Cohen made his way up to Double-A for the Oakland Athletics in the Midland Rockhounds. 3-3 with a 3.21 ERA in 31 appearances. Did make one start. Midland was kind of tinkering with the openers type deal. It wasn't like he was going to go 6 innings. Has recorded 4 saves for Midland this year, 42 innings of work, 52 strikeouts, and 22 walks. Go back to when we had John Cohen down here for one of the last regular season series, and he was showing us a video of, has really simplified the delivery, but oh, by the way, he's still throwing almost 100 miles an hour.
And over the last, just say 2 months, 4 earned runs in 22 innings.
That'll work.
So for somebody that's already proved themselves to a degree in Double-A, and we'll talk about this with another reliever in just a moment, you have to wonder if he maybe isn't in line for a promotion at some point the rest of this year.
Yeah, and tail end of last year, kind of the beginning of this year, was fighting through an injury, but it really seems like he is about as healthy as he's been in a while. Yeah. And being able to do what he did, wouldn't be surprised to see him up in AAA before too long, and John Cohen will be making a trip out to somewhere else.
I'll help you there anyway.
Oh, there's no doubt. He may be there before Chase is. Another guy in Double-A for a former Georgia Southern Eagle, Nick Jones, bones with the Rocket City Trash Pandas.
In Alabama.
Fantastic. Double-A for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. 1-0 record with a 3 ERA since he made the move up to Double-A. 19 appearances, is 1-for-1 in save opportunities. 21 innings of work, 30 strikeouts to 17 walks, and has really cut down on the walks the last couple of outings. And he's somebody you and I were talking about before we went on. He's somebody that you're probably going to see making the transition up another level for Los Angeles in the next little bit, because he's been heavily used the last couple of weeks.
There was a stretch where he was only throwing once a week, almost like a starter in the way that minor league schedules are now. Everybody gets every Monday off. So if you're a starter, you're probably throwing the same day every week unless you have some funky rotation going on with your system. But he's thrown 3 times in the last 5 days. That's very atypical for the current state of minor league baseball now. But you mentioned he's really cut down on the walks. He hasn't issued a single one over the last 7 innings. But the more that you go in a brief amount of time, more so than Cohen, I've got to think that the Angels are looking a lot at him, because we watched him develop here. It looks like that's going to another level, and about to go to another level, literally.
Yeah, and that's a fast track. I mean, you look at it, not this past season, obviously, but less than 2 years ago, he was pitching at J.I. Clements. Now he's knocking on the door of AAA.
He showed his pitching chart from his freshman year here, and I think he was hitting 83. And now he's 92, 94 with a fastball breaking ball combination that looks exactly the same until it's pretty much on you.
And one heck of a stash.
Yeah, you can't coach that.
No.
Or Skipper tried, but you can't coach that.
You can't. I mean, BJ did his best, but you can't coach the stash.
Bones has got to be Bones.
Yeah. One guy that is absolutely ecstatic to be able to talk about, Brian Eichhorn with the Lake County Captains, high A for the Cleveland Guardians. Almost said it, but I didn't. Cleveland Guardians organization. And he's somebody that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Started his rehab assignment after missing the previous 2 years because of injury. Started his rehab assignment in the Gulf Coast League on June 7th. Has made his way all the way up through Single A into High A. Has made 3 appearances for the Lake County Captains, 1-0, 4 2/3 innings of scoreless baseball, 7 strikeouts in those 4 2/3, and just 2 walks. And looks like Ike has gone back to Ike.
I think opponents are hitting barely over 200 against him over his 11 appearances since coming back. We know what he did here. We also know how tough that can be mentally when you don't get to do what you want to do for not 1 year but 2 years, because there was no minor league baseball because of COVID. You mix in Tommy John surgery, you mix in some shoulder problems, doesn't get a chance to come back, and he's been in High A for the last couple of weeks. So apparently the I almost said it. Guardians, my apologies. They realize that he's 24 years old now. Yeah. So good enough to go, good enough to succeed. Maybe bump it up and see what you really have.
And I think it kind of goes to show what the Guardians feel like they have in Eichhorn, because it's not often that you have a guy, especially a guy that hasn't seen AA yet, you have him out for a couple of years consecutively and just kind of waiting and seeing. So that kind of tells you what Cleveland thinks they have in Brian Eichhorn, to have that much faith to bring him back after that much time.
And these early results are proving them right.
Absolutely. Next guy up, Jordan Jackson from the Everett Aqua Sox. I don't know what an aqua sock is, but...
You just said it.
True.
It's an aqua sock.
There you go. Is it like a waterbed but a sock? Or is it aqua the color?
Yeah, I think the color.
Okay, we're going to go with that.
I mean, you could put your socks on a waterbed if you want to. Or put your socks while you're on a waterbed. That's tough, though.
That is. Seems like a bad idea.
Yeah.
But the Everett Aqua Sox, high A affiliate of the Seattle Mariners, moved up to high A from Modesto on July 26th. Has made 2 appearances, 10 1/3 innings of work, 7 strikeouts, and 3 walks for Jordan Jackson.
He's had the heaviest workload of any Georgia Southern pitcher in pro ball. He's made 19 appearances. He's almost up to 90 innings on the year, but he's really pitched well lately. Just 4 earned over his last 4 starts, 1.71 ERA over 21 innings. I don't know that they'd be looking to bump him to AA as quickly as they have with a couple of others that we've already talked about, but after a rough patch there, he's been really good for about a month now.
Next one up, part of the high A affiliate of the Chicago White Sox, Joe Nahas with the South Bend Cubs. 3-2 record, a 4.61 ERA. Has made 16 appearances, 4 starts on the year for South Bend, 57 strikeouts, just 33 walks, and just over 66 innings of work. But back in the middle of July, he was added to the development list. And for you that have been in minor league baseball for however many years, development list, that essentially means you're going back to the spring training facility or the whatever the team development site is, either in Florida or Arizona. And a lot of guys go for a rehab. A lot of people go to kind of tinker with something specific if you're trying to add a pitch, but you're not with the team. You're in the Florida, or in this case, Arizona site for the Chicago Cubs, and being able to work on what you need to work on without having to travel and deal with games.
Yeah, this would be the equivalent of if you're in the majors and getting sent back to the minors. They're basically looking as this being the minors of the minors. It's not that there's any kind of punishment being deployed, but I know with Joe, they are trying to add an extra pitch. He's predominantly been a fastball slider guy, trying to incorporate a little bit more of the 12-6 curveball. We know he's got the arm strength. We know he's got the durability. He's one of the most well-conditioned guys I've ever covered. I know he was only here for 1 year back in 2019, but once that shows a little bit of legs, and get him back up where he needs to be.
Next guy up in High A for Washington and the Wilmington Blue Sox, and Seth Schumann, on the year 3-2 record with a 3.23 ERA. He's made 14 starts and a pretty decent workload, 61 1/3 innings of work, 55 strikeouts to just 14 walks. He has battled through a couple of injuries, but was just placed on the, the middle of July, was placed on the injured list, and it looks like he may be shut down for the remainder of the year. But he's somebody that definitely showed Washington in his new club, and you got to talk to him earlier on a couple of weeks ago, but being able to see what he was able to show before having to go down with the injury.
Yeah, that was when he wasn't giving up an earned run in the entire month of May. But this is the second year that he has pitched with Wilmington. Somebody that if he can show that he's healthy going into 2023, I don't think it's out of the question that he could start in Double-A. It's likely, though, that he would return again to Wilmington, hopefully not for very long. We asked him if he had faced Juan Soto yet. Now, that may not be appropriate anymore, because if Soto ends up getting moved at some point, I know that the contract has been an issue, but maybe he can face with another squad if he gets a chance to get to the show at some point.
What, you got trade deadline coming up on Tuesday, I think?
And the deadline for draft picks was today.
That's right. There it is. Final former Eagle in professional baseball, Jonathan Edwards in Single-A for Los Angeles and the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes. Might be one of the best names in minor league baseball. But want to know the record in 7 appearances, a 9.45 ERA, just 6 2/3 innings of work, 12 strikeouts rather, and 13 walks. Trying to find his way a little bit in professional baseball, but in Single-A, everybody will pretty much tell you the individual numbers don't necessarily mean a whole lot. It's what you look like when you're putting up those numbers. Correct. So Edwards looking to try to find his way in professional baseball with the Single-A affiliate of Los Angeles.
And for somebody like that didn't get really that much work at Georgia Southern, if you're Los Angeles, you see a projectable 6'6" right-hander with not a lot of mileage, not a whole lot of tread worn on the tires. Why not take a shot, see if there's some development, and if it works out, it's house money.
Yeah.
So, and the strikeout numbers are good, 15 strikeouts in 10 innings so far, but it's the walks. If those can come down and just allow it to develop, then maybe there's something that can be done.
So that's your update on professional baseball. Former Eagles, again, Sam Howard with Toledo, AAA for Detroit, Chase Cohen with the AA affiliate of Oakland, the Midland Rockhounds, Nick Jones in AA for Los Angeles Angels with the Rocket City Trash Pandas, Brian Eichhorn, again, cannot tell you how ecstatic we are to talk about Brian Eichhorn again. Lake County Captains, High A for Cleveland. Jordan Jackson with High A for Seattle, the Everett Aqua Sox. Joe Nahas with the development side of the Chicago Cubs organization. Seth Schumann with the High A affiliate of Washington, the Wilmington Blue Rocks. And Jonathan Edwards with the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes, Single-A affiliate for the LA Dodgers.
And the break that Georgia Southern baseball caught this year is that neither Jesse Sherrill nor Noah Ledford were drafted. There were some conversations, the possibility that both could have gone maybe as early as day 2, certainly on day 3. But now, barring a free agent signee for both, they would be able to return as part of the team that just hosted. It still hasn't fully set in yet. For a 41-win squad that just hosted a regional, Sherrill's going to come back. He might be an All-American going into next year, and I don't think it's out of the question to say that Ledford could be an All-American going into next year because he was one after hitting 17 home runs this year.
Did have one person affected with the MLB draft, the aftermath, undrafted free agent for Hayden Harris with the Atlanta Braves. First Georgia Southern Eagle to sign with the Braves since Connor Simmons a number of years ago.
That's right.
Former good one for Georgia Southern in the bullpen, and now
lefty.
Another one going to the Braves.
Now, to think about him getting here in 2018, he got a lot of work as a reliever early, transitioning this year into a starter. I wish I could have seen that Notre Dame game work out for him, but unfortunately injury prevented him from making that start in the winner's bracket. But someone who undoubtedly turned his time around rapidly, and to see him have that success as the curtain was closing, pretty special for somebody who lasted 5 years and allowed himself to get better and didn't want to rush the process.
You know, I need to reach out to Hayden because I really want to know who called him from the Atlanta Braves scouting.
I hope it was Hugh.
I do too.
I really hope it was Hugh.
I do too. I'm glad you knew where I was going with that too.
He was playing in the development league, the MLB draft league, with the Frederick Keys up in the state of Maryland before getting signed.
Very nice. But again, that's your update on former Eagles in NFL camps, former Eagles in minor league baseball. We will keep you up to date on all the moving and shaking. Again, could see a couple bumping up to AAA over the next couple of weeks and months as minor league season starts to wind down in about a month and a half or so.
Now you have playoffs coming up here pretty soon, but our attention, Eagle football. Fall camp opens up Wednesday morning. Wow.
Wednesday at Paulson Stadium. Again, the rest of this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, all going to be just after 10 o'clock to just after noon. And it is all open at Allen E. Paulson Stadium for anybody and everybody to come out, get your first glimpse of what Eagle football will look like in 2022.
And the way that I'll put this is for everybody that's curious about what the offense is going to look like, what the defense is going to look like, what the specialists are going to look like. It's all open. If you can find a way to wiggle away during the week for just a little while, Paulson Stadium, Eagle Creek, wherever the schedule dictates. And then on the weekend, you'll have your scrimmages, as we talked about, on the 13th and the 20th. And it will be here before you know it. Then Morgan State will be making the trip down from Baltimore to open up the season.
It's crazy to think you're that close.
And for Coach Helton and staff, it was, okay, you've got 4 weeks left in the 2021 season. Then your 14-week off-season plan with 9 in the weight room with Bobby Steiner, and then 5 more on the field for spring practice, going through the summer, going through the transfer portal, figuring out who is sticking around, who is not going to be sticking around for the dawn of the Clay Helton era. They've had their individual workouts. They've had some on-field. They've, of course, continued their work in the weight room with Coach Steiner, but now Wednesday is where it really does begin. Media Day, we talk about in another way because it's talking season.
Yeah.
And this is how we truly prepare for what Wednesday is. And even though camp is only for a week because classes start on the 10th, it's still going to be camp-style practices leading up until game week going into September the 3rd against Morgan State.
Yeah, and don't expect on Wednesday for everybody to be full pads and everybody knocking each other's block off.
No,
this isn't quite 2012 again.
No, the NCAA has mandated that those first couple of days are just helmets and jerseys, eventually moving into shoulder pads or shells, where the spiders with the abbreviated version of the pads, and then they'll be full go at some point. I would think around the end of the week or beginning of next.
So you can get your fix of Georgia Southern football and get your prep done for what Wednesday will look like. You've had the summer sit-downs. The last couple of episodes that have come out have been with the coordinators. Turner West came out yesterday, I believe, maybe today.
That was earlier today.
One of those today.
And Will Harris, the last one should be tomorrow. Heard from Brian Ellis late last week. They go in depth on what it could look like, how they're using the talent that is here, how they're incorporating the talent that they've been able to bring in. And I don't know if you're going to find a group of coaches that are, one, more fired up to get this going, but two, for a group that hasn't been here all that long, they have this understanding of what Georgia Southern tradition is.
Yeah.
And when you worry about winning, it's funny how it happens.
Crazy how that happens.
When you preoccupy yourself with doing everything you can to put the best product on the field and to win, you start winning.
Do have one final question on Facebook Live before we sign off for this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation.
Okay.
Our buddy Jalen Prince asking, What is your favorite memory of when Eagle Nation and fans took over an opponent's stadium or arena? I have mine.
Well, I already know what yours is.
I have mine. I'm going first.
You go ahead. Because this is a good one, and I know this one.
First year Georgia Southern was in the Sun Belt Conference, 2014, right? 2014. We made our way up to Atlanta, and everybody knows that Georgia Southern folks in Atlanta will come out in droves. Well, at the time, Georgia State was not the top of the Sun Belt Conference. Let's put it that way. They were playing in the old Georgia Dome, so that was cool to be able to call the game from the Georgia Dome. And I have never heard a stadium so opposite of what it should have been in my life. Since or before.
Yeah.
It was unreal. Georgia Southern had the whiteout and completely blanketed the lower bowl of the Georgia Dome in white. When Georgia State ran onto the field, it was a resounding boo. And when Georgia Southern ran on the field, you would have thought it was the Falcons coming on the field. That was unreal to be able to see that. And then Georgia Southern ended up winning the game pretty convincingly.
Yeah.
And then that was the day that Georgia State decided to have a cash drop. And I missed the boat whenever a couple of months ago we had Ryan Chambers on as our guest host when you were doing the Eagle Club tours. I should have asked him about this because that might have turned into an hour and 20 podcast too.
You'll have to have him back now.
Yeah, that's true. Ryan Chambers, who was the sideline reporter for Georgia Southern at that time, was just outside the tunnel waiting for head coach Willie Fritz to come out and talk to him postgame. They do the cash drop on the opposite side of the field. They had roped off from the 50 to the end zone opposite of where Chambers was. He, on a dead sprint, I've never seen somebody in boat shoes run this fast, was hauling down the numbers, trying to get to the cash drop, and he got to about the 40 before he realized he was roped off and couldn't get there.
Of course he had the boat shoes on.
It was one of the single greatest things I have ever witnessed.
If Georgia Southern Museum ever needs an artifact, we need to send them Chambers' boat shoes.
Chambers just needs one of those like booths that has a video screen and you can just click on different stories. God. That would be awesome.
I will keep mine simple, same vein 4 years later, because all I had to go on was your guys' stories of 2014 at the Georgia Dome, playing at Turner in 2018 during Georgia Southern's 10-win season. That's when Georgia State was down a little bit after they had pretty couple of decent years under Trent Miles / Sean Elliott, but they were just 2-10 that year. And same idea. As soon as Georgia Southern took the field, you would have thought we were at Paulson. And then when Georgia State took the field, it was, well, like we were at Paulson.
Is that when they sang the Take Me Out to the Ball game?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
End of the third quarter.
Russ went over there and just stuck the mic in the middle of it.
That was the Panther Tears game with Colby Ransom, too.
Oh, that's right. Was that Beep Beep?
That was Beep Beep. That was Roadrunner. That was Roadrunner Beep Beep.
That was a fun day.
Yeah,
that was when we found the milk done from Skip Carey.
We had gone behind the stands behind second base. We found the bullpen. Found the bullpen. There was the couch still in the bullpen.
Yeah, and the foul pole laying behind the second base stands.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah, we didn't get to see first pitches from Keisha Lance Bottoms and Jonathan McCollar that day, but we made you believe we did.
Yes.
It was a 3-up, 3-down. If it was a 3,
the best part of that day, and I will remember this till the day I die. We come back from like our second or third break in the pregame show, and Frank just says, "There goes Bob Horner." Russ and I were done at that point.
The fact that we're in the Pete Van Wieren booth, the same booth.
Oh, no doubt.
Well, probably the same booth that at some point Vin Scully sat in.
Yeah.
Dude.
And you look out and there's a football field.
Yeah. Go there this year.
It's true.
Less train horn, the better.
Yeah, no joke. Ask Barry. Barry really loves that train horn.
The week we play Georgia State, we may need to have Barry on.
Oh, that's a good point. Very good point.
We'll get there.
Anyway, that's our favorite memory from when Eagle Nation and fans took over an arena in a stadium. But thank you for Jalen for sending that in. But that'll wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Again, always, you can get your questions into us. We'll tackle them on the next edition of Inside Eagle Nation. You can tweet us at GS Sports Network, email us email us to GSSN, Georgia Southern Sports Network, booth at gmail.com, and we will get those on the next edition of Inside Eagle Nation. But for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, until next week, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.